if you find yourself in an ambush, it wasn't a successful ambush, because if you find yourself in it, you're alive,
Yes.
But if you want to create an amazing counter ambush team, you have to make them ambushers. And with ambushing, you figure out where all the opportunities of not only successfully doing what you need to do are in your favor, but also to escape with your life. We're not going to be received by virgins in heaven. That's not the type of mentality that we had down there. But we start learning about some of these things, and also seeing, cartel forces apply some of these ambush tactics to the military or the federal forces.
What is an ambush? What are we talking about? So that's a surprise attack with an asymmetry of power kind of thing?
There's a contingency somewhere moving towards a place that you control and own, where you have the advantages, where they can't see you, but you can see them, where they can't predict you, but you can predict where they're going to go through, places where they forcibly have to pass. Places where they're predictable, places where you can not only predict, but also have a plan for yourself to escape and exit that place.
So how do you train for counter ambush?
You turn into a perfect ambusher. That's how you train for counter ambush.
Also, always trying to make sure you have more information about other people. You have the element of surprise, all of those things.
And Musashi would say, know your enemy, know his sword. Basically that, it's simplified.
But there's a lot of enemies around you. in Mexico, there's a lot of uncertainty, right? Because I guess that's what route analysis is.
Yeah, you prepare for the probable.
Yeah.
And if the impossible happens, you're halfway out of it, hopefully, And if you find yourself in an ambush, it wasn't a successful one. You as far as our training and the mindset, my experience with it, the adversarial thinking part of it has always been a very powerful one. I think one that a lot of people ignore, kind of leave to the wayside. Specifically in all conflicts out there, there's a tendency for a military force or a conventional force of any kind to be trained in a way where they dehumanize the enemy.
Yeah.
And when that happens, you become blind to the enemy's story. It's his capability, his story, his ability. If you treat the other side like an inhuman monster, it's hard to take notes.
So there's a part of this is a radical empathy for the quote unquote enemy.
At least for me personally, I wasn't one of the guys that would grab them and beat the shit out of them and put them in the back of a van, just tie them up and gag them.
So you were able to see them as human.
I learned that from my mother. She said, nobody's against you, Ed. They're for themselves. Learn this, and you will make friends of enemies. She said that when I graduated, and I carried that with me throughout my whole career.
But isn't there then a pain of killing another human?
Always.
But there isn't. Again, I apologize to go back to Ukraine. It's my only experience of this kind of harshness.
It is a powerful experience.
There's a dehumanization that happens. I suppose this is common in war. There's something like a video game aspect where people are almost having fun. There's a humor. And I think underneath that, the prerequisite is to see the enemy in the same way you see the enemy when you play Call of Duty. You don't really think, you think of them as NPCs, the bad guys. The Russians are called orcs in Ukraine. I mean, there's all kinds of other names.
For us, it was mugrosos, malandros, mugrosos, like dirty people, There's always something.
Over time, those are just words, but over time it gathers a kind of like a meaning to it that's more than just the words. Orcs, they're less than human.
Yeah,
they're dirty. They're too dumb to understand the evil they're doing, or whatever.
It's useful. It's useful.
Yeah,
it's part of the program.
But that's what and I've talked to soldiers, and some of them do have stories of momentarily remembering that there's a human on the other side. I've talked to one woman who's this really badass soldier, and she saw this really brave soldier on the other side do something that was almost stupid, how brave it was. And then she was trying to shoot him and she missed. And she said she couldn't sleep the night after, thinking, why did she miss? Why did she miss? And then she thought she missed because he was a hero. And she had this brief realization that there was a hero on the other side. Like the other side is heroes.
Yeah.
But then that quickly disappeared.
Yeah.
Again, but she had this moment, there's a human being that rises to defend his nation, to defend his people, and he could be heroic on the other side.
There are things that we're trained to depress or conceal or hide and kill in us when you're trained for something like that, or when you're in a conflict zone like that and you hear the narrative constantly being blared out that the other side is a orc, or whatever word you want to use. But we live in a day and age when you can see Americans going off to Japan and shaking hands with some of their former enemies. I mean, some of us have seen that, and how things change. I think years from now, a lot of the stuff that we are taking right now is of the utmost importance won't matter anymore.
The question is how many years?
That's
a question I asked of a lot of people in that part of the world. And a lot of them currently, they're also self-aware about it.
Yeah.
They're like, I'm not sure I trust my current feelings.
Yeah.
But the current feelings are generational.
Yeah.
Like for decades, I will not just hate the leadership, I will hate all Russian people.
I can't understand that on my side of my life experiences, because our war has been an internal war, amongst our people or amongst our houses.
While that is the propaganda, there's also a deep grain of truth that there is a oneness to the people of that region.
Yeah.
But people will get very offended at that idea, because right now it's a very strong nationalist borders. But there is a cultural history that connects people. I mean, in some deep sense, we're all connected. We all come from Western Africa, and then all came from fish before then, depending on your view of history of life on Earth. But there is a oneness to us, and often you forget that in conflict.
I had an experience working. There was a friend of mine who took the other path. And went to work for some of these criminal groups. I was operational, and we saw a bunch of people in a gas station parked. Back then, the main, modus operandi that they had was that they would impersonate or dress up as federal police. And that's how they would move around the city. We saw these Suburbans in a gas station. And some of the guys were carrying around AK-47s, and that's not a standard issue firearm. So, we saw that, and I got off on foot and walked by to try and get a, better sense of what was going on. I took everything off, wearing jeans and a t-shirt, and I got a whistle from one of the guys that was there, and my name was called. It was one of the guys that I grew up with. Redhead kid. Looked like El Canelo, There's redheads in Mexico, by the way. I think it's probably some of the Irish that betrayed the American side during the last Mexico-American War that stayed down there and had a bunch of kids. So it's probably from there.
Love is stronger than anything else, I think.
So this redhead kid. When I say kid, I mean he was my age. Now, to my eyes, he's always going to be younger now. He whistled, told my name. He said, "Hey, ¿qué haces aquí, cabrón?" I'm like, "What are you doing here?" It's like, "Oh, shit, I'm just, going home. I just going to get a taxi." It's like, "Oh, okay." As he walks over, so he has a plate carrier with AK round magazines on his chest. AK without a stock on it. Just carrying it in his hand. He comes over and he hugs me. I could feel the magazines on my chest. Mind you, I have a gun on me, tucked. And Nextel is buzzing in my back pocket as people are trying to, figure out what the fuck's going on. He asked me small talk shit. Like, "Hey," it's like, "What are you doing? Like, what do you work at?" And I was like, "I'm just looking for a job. I used to work at a video store." So he's like, "I haven't seen you in a while. How's so-and-so of your family?" "Good." "How's so-and-so of your family?" "Good." It's like, "Yeah, it's like, this is an interesting job you have." He's like, "Yeah, it's pretty good. They pay us well. You get you get a car, there's money, and nobody fucks with you. You get respect." I was like, "That's awesome, And if you want, I can get you in, if you want that." It's like, I'm too much of a coward for that, I told him.
Conversation like any other.
Yeah.
Between two friends.
He hugs me before I go. I have something to him. I can't remember what. And he says, "Hey," in my ear, "I know what you do for a living. It's not a safe place for you to be in." And I walk off. A few moments later, the army showed up. And you could feel the amount of rounds going off from 2 blocks away. We came back with our guys, and it was over.
So he didn't survive that.
I looked through the bodies and the cars that were left. There was bodies all over the place. People left there. It was a mess. I spent like an hour looking for him. The only way I could recognize him was his hair. I stayed with his body all night. There's a bridge in Tijuana that goes over the river in a place called La Mesa, and that's where the forensic offices were. His body was taken there, and I stayed with his body until it was released. I told his family about it because I knew them. And that aspect of us versus them, or they're the enemy and shit like that. My mom told me those words. Nobody's against you. They're just for themselves. So don't make the mistake of dehumanizing anybody.
And those roles could have been easily reversed.
I could have been shot in the face there. That aspect that conflict brings, where let's say bad guys, good guys, heroes, villains. There's an innocence to that goes away.